have on. They know their stuff for sure on this topic, which is of critical importance to all recruiters and employers hiring today. So with that in mind, feel free to follow along the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag Glassdoor, and you can ask any questions on Twitter as well. So with that, welcome to today's webinar, and we'll start off with a few housekeeping items. Next slide. Okay, how to use the control panel. If you're hearing me, you're already doing something right, but you'll see that's on the right side. If you have any questions that might come up during the webinar, please feel free to type those in there, and we will answer them at the end, unless it's applicable to something that's being talked about, in which case we will answer it live. And with that in mind, please know that this program is being recorded, so if you're frantically taking notes or trying to get in all this great information, please know that we will be sending you an archive recording along with a copy of the deck. Next slide. And so again, huge thanks to today's sponsors, Glassdoor, one of my favorite companies and a great partner for recruiting blogs. So if you don't know about Glassdoor, you will by the end of the webinar, but definitely check them out, www.glassdoor.com. Next slide. And so yeah, there's my goofy mug. That's me. You won't have to hear me talk for much longer, but if you want to give me a shout out, there's my contact information. And without further ado, I will present our presenters. Next slide. All right, so today's presenters are two people who I am fortunate enough to have worked with for years and know well, and I have to tell you, there are not two better people you can learn the secrets to building a great employer brand from and get some actionable insights and expertise to really start doing some of this work today. So one of our presenters, Alicia Garibaldi, is the author of Employer Branding for Dummies, which seems to be a somewhat duplicative title, but it's a really good read, definitely worth checking out. And Alicia works in the corporate communications and PR department at Glassdoor. She does a lot of their training sessions, develops original content, and helps make Glassdoor a thought leader, both in the recruiting and branding space. Lots of great experience with agencies and working on accounts like HP, Yahoo, and Sprint. So welcome, Alicia Garibaldi, and you can find Alicia on Twitter at, Alicia's Twitter handle is Alba, A-L-B-A, Garibaldi, G-A-R-I-B-A-L-D-I. And then our other presenter is Will Staney, and Will Staney is the Global Head of Recruiting, also known as the Lead Talent Warrior, which I think is one of the most badass titles in the market, at Glassdoor. And Will actually just joined relatively recently. Prior to Glassdoor, Will actually helped build the employer brand and recruitment marketing function and social recruiting function at SuccessFactors, SAP, and VMware. And last year, prior to joining the company, was named the Glassdoor Talent Warrior of the Year, meaning that a bunch of people think that he is the best recruiter in the world of the World Wide Web, and I would actually happen to agree. He's also the only guy who can make Google Glass look cool. So with that in mind, welcome Will and Alicia.
Thanks so much for the great introduction, Matt. I'm so excited to be speaking on this webinar today here with Will Staney on the secrets of building an incredible employer brand. As Matt mentioned, I recently worked with Wiley & Sons to author Employer Branding for Dummies, and this webinar is based on the chapters straight from that book. Will and I will cover everything at a high level, and then after the webinar, you'll get your own copy if you'd like to dive in further. So let's go over the agenda for today's webinar. Firstly, we're going to explain what is an employer brand. We'll also define transparency and how that applies to your employer brand strategy. We'll then get into how to better engage with current employees and encourage them to tell your story, and wrap up with how to make your brand visual and also how to go mobile.
Awesome. Glad we got that mute situation figured out. All right, so as Alicia mentioned, you'll all get a copy of the Employer Branding for Dummies book after the session today. And the first thing you'll actually see in the book is a foreword by a dear friend of mine and Matt's, Lars Schmidt. He could not join us today because his wife and him just had their first baby yesterday, so he's got more important things to tend to. But a couple of things I wanted to point out that he does mention in the foreword is, one, if you aren't focused on your brand from a recruiting perspective, you're falling behind the competition because a lot of others are focused on it. And also, you need to be focused on how you're perceived as an employer from the view of your candidate. So, in other words, having an employer's brand strategy is no longer a luxury; it's an imperative in today's recruitment market. All right. So let's talk about the ingredients that make up an employer brand, because I know a lot of you are thinking, where on earth do I begin, right? And your employer brand is really a mixture of your culture, your employees' opinions, your candidates' opinions, and your corporate brand.
And Will, I think it's always been easy to justify dollars spent on one's corporate brand, but it's important to note that as you're developing an employer brand, that this element is certainly a part of it. In fact, we just ran a recent survey of all of our sales professionals on Glassdoor. More than 1,000 responded to us, and 78% said they would accept less money to work at a company selling something compelling. So your corporate brand definitely plays a role in the talent that you attract. So on the next slide, let's talk about where to begin. Now that we know what makes up an employer brand, let's talk about where to start. We created this book because we kept hearing over and over again from recruiters and HR professionals that yes, we know employer branding is important, but where do you start when you go about creating one?
Yeah, I know I've entered a lot of roles where my biggest task was to work on the employer brand or build employer brand from scratch or improve an existing employer brand that wasn't really working out. And the most important thing to understand, is what your company offers to candidates, what your company is expressing as its culture, and is that the same as what your employees are saying? Is that the same as what your candidates are saying? An easy answer to ask yourself is, if I were out there looking, would I want to work for my company? If I went on and read my Glassdoor reviews, if I did research to see what was going on about my company, what people were saying, would I have made the same decision?
That's right. Well, I think leaving employees out of developing your employer value proposition is a big mistake. You need to walk around to your top talent at your own office and ask them their favorite things about working at your company and ensure that that's reiterated as you're recruiting top talent. Also, clearly being able to define how your company differs from its competitors and what it offers to employees is certainly important.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is really where the recruiting and marketing world combine, where you really have to think about your personas, right? You have to think about what are the kind of employees that I'm trying to attract, what kind of skills they have, what kind of soft skills do they have, and then weave what appeals to that target audience into your company's unique messaging or your unique selling proposition when it comes to your employer brand.
Absolutely. And Will, I know you've started at a lot of companies and have been tasked with putting together an employer brand strategy. So can you talk at a high level at some of those challenges and benefits of an employer brand?
Yeah, I mean, just depending on the size of the organization, and I've worked for organizations that were now 300 people to 1,000 people to 75,000 people, and it's really different in each one as far as its complexity and how to do that. And I would say in a larger organization, the challenges can be driving internal awareness, because I really think that building an employer brand starts internally with your own employees, getting them engaged, and the hardest thing really is working with internal comms, working and partnering with marketing to make sure that that message is being heard by employees. You got to activate those soldiers to be out there and be sort of brand ambassadors for that brand as well. Also, executive sponsorship, getting leadership to understand just the time and resources that takes and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about budget allocation in just a minute, but it really takes allowing leadership to understand that this is something that needs attention and it needs budget, it needs resources.
Absolutely, Will. And let's talk about some of the benefits So when you have a clearly defined employer brand, your recruitment costs will go down. Candidates, they're more likely to be coming to your door rather than the other way around. And I think today it's just as much about the candidate interviewing you as you are them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's really about turning cold calls into warm calls. I mean, when a candidate is aware of your company and your culture, it helps better prepare them, and it also acts as sort of an organic filter. When candidates, and when you're really transparent and you're putting it all out there, it allows candidates to have a better ability to either self-select or self-deselect themselves out of the interview process or out of the apply process. Someone may research your culture and realize, actually, I don't think I would fit in that culture, rather than just applying and then using those resources of your recruiter staff to figure out later on in the process that, oh, this is not a cultural fit, right? So, again, differentiating what makes your company unique will set you apart from the competition and attract talent that fits the culture for your company, as well as help retain your current employees so you're not having to refill more roles and further burden your recruiting department.
Yeah, and there's also a ton of data available now that wasn't available previously. And it's critical in today's recruitment landscape that recruiters really wear a marketing hat as well. A strong employer brand, it improves employee retention, like Will just said, and with that, employees are more engaged and they're more likely to promote your brand for you. Remind them about what they really love about working at your company. I know referral programs, they really go a long way here. Right, Will?
Yeah, I mean, when employees are really happy, and have a pride in their company and their culture, they want their friends to join them, and they want to talk about it, and they naturally do. I mean, people have always talked about what it's like to work at their company, and referrals from most companies are number one source of hire. In fact, our overall source of hire at Glassdoor is 40%, and for our sales positions, it's actually closer to 70%. And so your referral strategy can only work with having a strong brand and engaged employees, and employee referrals are usually the best quality of hire as well.
Definitely. Now let's talk about some challenges when defining your employer brand. One, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, is budget allocation. A lot of companies, they don't have the budget set aside specifically for employer branding. So this can be a big challenge. And this phrase is relatively new, right? I know Wiley and I, as we started working on this book, we were shocked that we couldn't find any literature to simplify employer branding.
Yeah, I mean, in creating an effective employer brand takes, content. Content is what fuels us to be able to tell the story what it's like working at a company. And creating content takes time. It takes engaging with candidates. It takes community management on your social communities, responding to Glassdoor reviews, places where people are talking about you. So it does. If you're relying on people whose day jobs are other things, you have to know that you have to take resources away from other things to make that happen. So making sure your leadership knows that they need a budget, or at least resources, people, headcount dedicated to helping build this and launch a project like building an employer brand or revamping one. You need to have a dedicated budget, or resources, hopefully both, to do it really effectively. Yeah, I would say, number two is also awareness, right? So for those of you listening to this webinar, that have a brand and need to build awareness, and I think this happens to a lot of B2B focused companies. I think a lot of companies just don't have that recognized consumer brand. Not everybody is Coca-Cola or PepsiCo or Microsoft or Apple or Google, right? Like I started my career at VMware, arguably said to be one of the top three most innovative companies. But whenever I told my friends I worked at VMware, they didn't know, unless that friend happened to be an IT guy, and then they totally geeked out and were like, "Wow, you work at VMware." So it was sort of this silent giant. So we had to launch a big initiative to build out more of a consumer awareness from an employment side with VMware that was rather successful. And I think they're one of the case studies in the book that we'll be talking about later on.
Definitely. We'll touch on that in a bit. Another challenge is the recruitment funnel. We hear this a lot, right? Maintaining a steady pipe of candidates coming to you in all different areas will only make your job easier. And if you have a good talent attraction strategy, it'll work because it's a numbers game, right? How do you get these people to come to you? You can use a great employer brand to do so. Another challenge is candidate quality. When you do a good job of showing who you are as an employer and what your culture is really like, people are attracted to that culture and they're more likely to apply. Not only that, they come into the hiring process a lot more informed. So now that we've set the stage, we've talked about challenges, benefits, all the ingredients in an employer brand, let's talk about the 5 pillars that we lay out in the book. And this is kind of all the different pillars that we see making up your employer brand. First and foremost is data analysis. And we start there because you need to look at the data to be able to benchmark in different areas. That way you can monitor your progress over time. The second pillar is transparency. And transparency today is imperative, right? Candidates want an inside look of what it's like to work at your organization. We hear that over and over again. Thirdly, an employee engagement strategy will help you as you develop your employer brand because your employees, they are your brand. You need to include them in the conversation as you pull together your company's message. Fourth, you need to have visuals. Visuals help relay the culture and give candidates an inside preview of the teams they'll be joining. And lastly, we'll talk about mobile at the end because it's important that you reach candidates everywhere that they're searching for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the research that we've done at Glassdoor, we've seen that actually 50% of our overall traffic just on Glassdoor is from mobile alone. So it's critical to include a mobile strategy as you develop your employer brand. And this doesn't mean, this means multiple things. Sometimes having a social strategy is a mobile strategy. Having a video strategy on YouTube, things where your content about working your place can be easily accessed and seen on mobile is a good place to start. Or simply just having your jobs available to be seen on mobile, maybe saved later, or maybe I have a pipe dream here, but I'd love to see a day where you can apply to jobs via mobile by most employers. I think right now on Glassdoor on our site you can, but I know that's not the norm. I think that's only about 3% of companies out there.
Yeah.
Right? But let's talk about that first pillar, all right, analyzing data. You now have the ability to measure your employer brand from various sources. In some, struggle, it's the same struggle when you're a marketer, right? Recruiters are becoming more like marketers. There's so many kinds of ways to analyze your data, looking at anything from your engagement on social, where candidates are coming from sources and matching that with your hiring data to understand what content and what kind of visuals are you putting out there that are resonating with your audience and what aren't, and to be able to adjust your strategy in real time.
Right. Well, I do this all the time in my current role as a marketer. Are we increasing engagement with our content? Do we have enough mentions on social media? Are we driving the right traffic that we want to see? The same goes as a recruiter. You need to ask yourself those same questions along with, has my time to hire improved? Has my candidate quality increased? And are candidates clicking on the jobs that I want them to be? Glassdoor has a lot of these analytics to help you manage your reputation, see improvement in key areas, and analyze the competition and more. But what's critical, and like I said, we are tasked with the same thing as marketers, is to put a stake in the sand and know what areas you'll be looking at and measuring to see if your employer brand strategy is working. One way to do this that we point out in the book is tracking competitors' brand performance. So this is another area, and again, we do this as marketers. You can learn a lot from the competition. Are you looking at the demographics of what candidates they might be attracting? Is it different than yours? Is it because of how they've put together their employer brand and message to candidates? Are you comparing traffic monthly and also seeing how your ratings differ? Another great thing to look at and identify is the channels your competition is using to reach talent. Are they using the same platforms, or are they using some that you might not be?
Yeah, I know the way I've done this in the past is, obviously following others in the space, even competitors for talent, looking inside the the dashboard in my Glassdoor and the employer dashboard, and being able to see how I stack up in different facets of my employer brand, from culture to the kind of reviews I get right there, and be able to compare myself to others in my industry, and maybe just others who are also competitors for talent. So being able to really compare yourself and look how you stand out to the competition can give you a competitive edge to understand, one, how you differentiate from others that are trying to attract the same people, but also where you stack up against them, where you need to improve.
Absolutely. And monitoring your brand's performance over time can also be done by analyzing employees' likes and dislikes, monitoring candidate activity, and seeing the demographic of the audience coming to your page. We also have programs, I know, here at Glassdoor that help drive targeted awareness to really hard-to-fill roles through display ads, so you should definitely check those out. And of course, like we mentioned, comparing that traffic to competitors will help give you a lot of insight as you develop your employer brand strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask yourself, who is the type of candidate that you're trying to attract today? It's important to know that current employees, are also who you're trying to attract, right? When they see content and they notice their friends and their coworkers in that content, in those stories, it becomes personal to them, and they want to share, and it helps sort of the virality of the viralness, whatever buzzword you want to use, that helps expand that message to their friends and their friends' friends, right? So you can learn a lot and by trying to retain your employees through employer branding internally and externally. It takes both sides, and you can learn a lot through an exit interview as well, right? What ATS are you working with? These types of things, knowing the technology you're working with can help kind of measure and track this over time.
Definitely, and I think it's super important to set a tracking schedule. So in the book, we came up with different areas to check weekly, monthly, annually. You'll want to, like I said, meet with key stakeholders at your own organization and probably tweak these depending on what areas that you want to measure. But it's really important that as you have this employer brand in place, that you're looking month over month, year over year, seeing what message, it's great to always adapt and make sure that that message is reaching who you want to be reaching. And I just wanted to bring up a stat that we found surprising when we surveyed employers last month. 32% of employers surveyed said that they didn't know their cost per hire on the job boards that they're currently using.
I believe that statistic. I think it might actually be a little higher. I mean, there's so many factors that go into the cost per hire. I mean, I have some people ask if recruiters' salaries should be factored in there, what metrics to look at. I mean, you really just have to sit down and set a benchmark of how you measure, and then measure that over time so that you can see how that's changing. What I've seen, I've been really meticulous for years now about measuring everything as far as source that candidates are coming from, tools my recruiters are using when they're outbound sourcing, and matching that back to the hiring data so that I understand in real time how some of the marketing efforts that I'm doing are actually turning into hires or making my hiring process more efficient. And what I've learned is when you are measuring and benchmarking, you're looking at different strategies that you're doing from a recruitment marketing standpoint and matching that with your hiring data. The more you do it, the more efficient you get at understanding what sources are best, where you're reaching your best talent. And as you keep adjusting, it does save your company so much money because you stop spending money in the places that aren't working, and you start focusing on the places where that niche talent that you're trying to find is at, and you become more efficient and waste a lot less of your recruiter's time as well.
So now let's move on to the second pillar, which is transparency. We define this in the book, and I'll just read the quick definition for you on the line. Transparency as used in business implies openness, including being open to feedback and sharing openly with your employees and candidates the strengths and weaknesses of your company. So this has to be a two-way conversation, right? Openness, communication, and accountability are important. Candidates expect realistic job previews, if I haven't said that enough. Don't false advertise, because ultimately you'll attract candidates that don't truly fit your culture, and they won't be likely to stick around.
Yeah, so use a checklist to help companies be more transparent. Again, this will be included in the book, but just briefly, highlighting your employer brand wherever your candidates are searching for you. So having a multi-channel marketing strategy to your employer brand is very important. Give your employees a voice. Invite them to blog about their experience. Do an Instagram hashtag contest where they take pictures at work. Utilize social media, and then share. I don't know, not so much as sharing frequently, but sharing consistently. Having a consistent presence in these spaces is important. Respond to people reaching out. If somebody tweets you about a status of their application, it doesn't take but a couple seconds to check that and respond back. Responding to your reviews on Glassdoor, that doesn't cost you anything to be able to do that. Publicize your wins. If you won a recent award, it's a great place to work, or other things, let people know about that. Pat yourself on the back and celebrate those wins that you have from a talent attraction standpoint, right? And then again, make sure you're creating that mobile presence. Keep mobile in mind with everything you do, because that's really, as far as with the internet being the main way that we communicate employer brand, mobile is going to be more and more important, so that you're not missing out on a huge chunk of that audience.
Definitely. And I know we said at the beginning that we would talk a little bit about VMware, because I think they do this extremely well. They engage with talent and are transparent with employees and keep them involved in the conversation as they develop their employer brand. So as we highlight in the book, VMware's Architects of What's Next campaign is a great example of an employer brand campaign that focused on asking employees why they came to work at VMware. They found that across the company, the employees wanted to make a difference in the IT industry by being on the leading edge of change. That was a resounding message from everyone that they surveyed. And from there, they created a personalized message to further attract that talent. They also utilized social media for their corporate crush campaign and encouraged employees to tweet and post on social media about what they loved about the organization using the hashtag #ILoveVMware. They made it fun and engaging by using company bobbleheads in different locations. And these are just a few examples of ways to provide an authentic preview of your work environment to potential candidates and get employees excited about being involved in the conversation.
Yeah, they're really doing a great job over there. I miss working with those guys. I hired a few people on that team. I worked with a lot of them in beginning to create some of those social accounts and social strategy, and they've just taken it, and it's a whole other monster now. They're doing amazing work over there. I'm really proud of that team.
They do a great job. We like working with them. And then just quickly, I wanted to cover some quick success results that they've had by highlighting their employer brand on Glassdoor. As a result, they've made 20 hires, and they see Glassdoor as a top 5 influencer for new hires. They also increased awareness of their employer brand by 65%. And like Will mentioned earlier in the webinar, this was a big pain point for them because they were pretty well known on the corporate level and amongst IT professionals, but not necessarily to consumers outside of IT. So this was a big, big win for them. And then I also wanted to talk about a new program that we have about Glassdoor. When we talk about transparency, we want to reward employers for being transparent places to work. So this program called Open Company actually validates transparency within your organization to job seekers. I know Salesforce just completed the process and they were super excited about it. It's a 5-step process doing all the best practices that we see transparent organizations doing. So definitely check that out, and it will help distinguish your brand to job seekers. Let's move on to the third pillar, engaging your employees. So this stat is pretty interesting. We did a survey with Harris Interactive back in January of 2012. It was a survey commissioned by Glassdoor, and it found that the most trusted resource for learning about companies was family and friends, right? People are going to trust their family and friends. 52% said that. And then it was followed by feedback and reviews from other people who work at the company. The least trusted resources for learning about companies were a company's own website and a company recruiter. That's a pretty interesting stat.
Right, because I think most people's inclination is that, a company and a recruiter has an agenda. Their job is to try to hire you. So, while you're definitely going to talk to them if you're interested, the places where you're going to do your research are where your personal network and professional network are, right? I mean, it's, you've got to make sure that you're posting and engaging with candidates in those channels now. We can't just be focused on engaging with candidates where candidates go to look for jobs. We have to engage with candidates where they're researching and looking for information about your company. So having a good SEO strategy, making sure that you're responding to reviews on Glassdoor. It's a big place, obviously, where people are researching your company, but also, on Facebook and Twitter and Google+, and having that multi-channel strategy where people are talking about your brand. And the fact is that they're doing this since the beginning of jobs, which is like the beginning of time. We've always had a job, right? Everyone outside of that talked about their jobs. What's the first thing you do when you meet someone new? Oh yeah, what do you do for a living? I mean, that's the first question you ask. So naturally, people are always talking about jobs. It's now us, the employers, that need to be out there and joining the conversation. We now have the tools to listen in on those conversations and interact and respond. It's a two-way conversation now. And if you're not out there having that two-way conversation, you don't have the control, you don't have the insight to help make your company better at employer branding overall.
Absolutely. And these are just some other stats on why employee engagement is important. Let's talk about how much weight employee opinions carry. These are a few stats from a Glassdoor site survey in October of 2013. More than half of job candidates read online reviews before forming an opinion about a company. A vast majority of job seekers, a whopping 78%, say that employee ratings and reviews are influential when deciding where to work. And of all the job seekers, 87% are more likely to visit a company's career site after they view its profile and read employee reviews.
Yeah, I mean, conversation about your organization is critical, right? To your employer brand, to reputation. And I really even believe that it really comes down to the partnership with marketing too, because I think your overall company brand stands to benefit a lot from building a strong employer brand, because who doesn't want to do business with a company that has happy employees or that treats their employees right? It really humanizes your overall company brand when you have a strong employer brand. And that means, tuning in and listening to what people are saying both inside and outside your company when it comes to what it's like to work there.
Definitely. And so let's talk about some of those external sources that you can look at for employee engagement. Some tools that you can use to measure are read employee reviews. Find out what your employees within the organization are saying about what it's like to work there. Look at company ratings. See how you're rated in different areas and what people think about how you're doing in those areas. Check the CEO rating. There's also interview reviews. You can learn a lot about a first impression from somebody who comes to your organization. And also check salary postings to make sure that your salary packages are competitive.
Yeah, I mean, external sources help you really get a pulse on what's going on inside your organization. It can help create positive change. And there's companies that are responding to negative reviews or feedback that they're getting on Glassdoor. That sometimes it turns it into something more valuable than even a positive review. When you see that a company took the feedback, made a change, and then responded, letting them know that, hey, thank you for your feedback. We actually changed this. Our interview process is now cut in half. Like things like that. I love seeing that. So you've got to monitor these resources and for this type of information, but also monitor conversations on Twitter, on Instagram, other places where consumers are talking about your company. All right, let's talk about internal sources. There are also some great internal sources that you can use to engage with your employees, whether that's opinion surveys, internally, surveys at employee milestones. Whenever you do review, in your quarterly goals and things like that, getting that feedback from employees at those times. Also, exit interviews I found to be pretty good at getting information, and different formal step interviews. Also, when you're getting employees and you're starting to do this content-based approach to employer branding, in those moments, I think one of my favorite parts of doing content around employer branding is sitting down when we're doing either employer branding videos or doing an Instagram of something cool that's going on in the offices. And each one of those times, I sit down with each individual employee and I get to hear their personal story of why they came. And what I start to realize is all those little personal stories together you start seeing the commonalities between them, and then you start to realize, wow, everyone's kind of saying these certain things about us, or everyone really gets a sense of pride from this part of our culture. And I started to realize that that's our employer brand. It's talking to all these individual stories, and then that together making one, unified statement of what truly working at your company is like. And I think it's really cool to see, and it's a great time to really engage employees and get them as part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's critical with engaging with employees to keep in mind what you want out of it. Just like Will said, you want to understand the top 5 skills required to perform any job within your organization and analyze the skill set needed for every department. This way, you can gear your job descriptions to appeal to that talent.
And I love job descriptions that are written in more of a spoken language, because I think most job descriptions are written like more like people descriptions instead of job descriptions. It's like, I'm looking for this kind of person with this kind of skill set, with this kind of experience, when it should be like, this is what this job is like.
Yeah.
Day to day, you'll be doing this and working on this project, which is going to help the company achieve this revenue stream. Like, I want to know more about the job in a job description than what you are expecting of me.
Totally. And I think the only way to get that is by talking to current employees that are doing that job really well.
That's right. Yeah.
So we include this in the book, so I won't spend too much time on this. We also have great resources on our site for tips for responding to reviews. This shows that you have that two-way conversation going back and forth between an employee and from your organization. So definitely check that out in the book. And like I said, we have the 5 do's and don'ts to responding to reviews ebook as well on our website at employers.glassdoor.com. And let's talk about this case study because I love this case study. Zillow's CEO responds to reviews, and this shows candidates that he really cares about his employees. As a result, 4 candidates in the 30-day period said it solidified them wanting to accept the job offer to go and work there.
I love this case study. Like I think it's a great way, and it shows how important it is to brand your executive leadership. I mean, when you brand your leadership and your leadership shows transparency and gets involved, even at the lowest level, issues like this, it makes it easier to hire people on their teams. And I think you should do this, even beyond just the CEO level. Making sure your CMO, your CTO, that these people are blogging and adding to their industry, or responding to Glassdoor reviews when it pertains to their organization's hiring. I mean, that type of stuff really can solidify a candidate to understand, okay, that's the kind of leader I want to work for.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's talk about a few, 5 key tips to encourage employees to tell their story. Like, for example, we did this Purina kind of collaboration with Purina's corporate brand when it was National Take Your Dog to Work Day. It was really fun. We kind of got with them beforehand. That's a big part of our culture here at Glassdoor. We have dogs everywhere. It's awesome. I bring my dog in. And one of
I do too.
You do, yes.
I have my dog here today.
Yeah, and Ron is actually one of our senior web developers. He's also a photographer, and we did this awesome photography session with a lot of the dogs of Glassdoor, and we were tweeting about that, and I got to learn more about our employees through their love of their dogs. I wouldn't have even thought that, but you can encourage them by making it fun and making it highlight them. And who doesn't like to be recognized? And, that's a big motivator of how I've got employees to do it, because it's pretty much me saying, you're a model of a great employee here, and we want to tell your story. And who doesn't want to be heard and tell their story? And it makes for amazing content.
Definitely. And I hear that a lot from recruiters at other, big companies around the Bay Area. It's how do I motivate my employees to do this type of stuff? Well, a lot of easy ways to do that are to have contests, make sure you're celebrating all those milestones at your organization and capturing that sentiment. And also, have events for your employees, reward them, and this will ensure employees, they're more likely to share your success on social.
Yeah, and here's the fourth pillar, and we talked a little bit about this theme throughout, really, is that, you got to make it visual. And social and web communication is all about visuals. I don't know about you, but I am very ADHD when it comes to online. I'm not going to read usually a long diatribe on a Facebook status. But I will click on a 2-minute video, or I will watch or I will look at some really great pictures on Instagram. I love Instagram, but it's a great way to engage employees and really get your brand circulated through visuals. It's a click of the share button.
Yeah, and a quick stat on that we include in the book, a study by Performix found that 44% of people are more likely to engage with brands that post pictures. I think, like Will said, we're so inundated with copy and emails all day long that visuals can really give an inside look without having to read too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important to note that, once you have all these great visuals, that you want to be sure to optimize on social platforms, right? Some of the things that I've done, and you saw that in the VMware case study with the I Love VMware hashtag. When I was at SAP, we did the Life at SAP hashtag, and we socialized that amongst the employees. So when employees are just naturally doing their thing, especially millennial employees, and they're taking a picture of some sort of work-related activity, it's already socialized in their mind to use the Life at company hashtag when they're doing that, and then that allows you to monitor and get that content and share it and retweet it and get it out there. So having a tagging strategy, using relevant hashtags, and resharing your employees' own generated photos, which are out there, is a really great low-cost addition, zero-cost addition to some great employer branding content.
Absolutely. And now let's talk about the last pillar, going mobile. I know this is a big topic, but we really want to get to all of your questions. So let's just talk about it at a high level. We find that it's critical to have a mobile strategy because this is where your talent is today. I said this earlier on the webinar. If you're anything like me on the line, you're on your phone more times a day than your desktop. So you need to make sure that candidates can find you on a mobile device. What will it say about your company if you aren't mobile friendly, especially if you're a tech company? Or are your competitors utilizing a mobile strategy and you might not be? This is a way that you can have a leg up on the competition. And let's talk about how you can optimize your career site for mobile.
Yeah, I mean, I know our career site is mobile friendly and working on another tablet version as well right now. But I think mobile it's not just about mobile strategies. What are the expectations of today's candidates? I mean, we know that almost half of the working population was born after 1980, meaning they're in their early 30s. They grew up in the internet age. They have mobile phones that they live on. We also know that 70% of candidates that are going to search for your job are doing so from a mobile device. So it's not something that we can ignore anymore, right? 89% of employees who plan to look for a new job in the next 12 months cited that mobile devices were critical as their job search tool. 90% of career sites don't even support mobile, though. And then 68% said that they will use a mobile device to search for jobs at least once a week. And we have 90% of companies whose jobs can't even be found on mobile, or their career sites not optimized for mobile. That has to be something that we change.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a big disconnect. So these stats, just for everybody on the line, the 90% stat is from iMomentus. They put out a study each year about how many companies have, adapted to a mobile recruiting solution. So that's 90% of career sites have it. definitely needs to change because we surveyed the users on our site. 89% plan to look on a mobile device in the next 12 months, like Will said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, there's definitely a divide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also realize that it has benefits when it comes to candidate experience as well. Like on Glassdoor, you can go and search for one of our jobs and fully apply with resume using Dropbox, Google Drive, or applying with your LinkedIn profile literally in a matter of minutes. And I've gotten the feedback from candidates has been awesome. I had somebody actually reach out to me and say, thank you for giving me the best experience I've had applying to a job in over 7 months. And I was like, this is great. And that's happened since we've gone mobile.
Yeah. And so this is also in the book, a quick checklist for how to develop a mobile strategy. First, you want to analyze the site traffic. This can be a quick meeting with your web team or your ATS to see if people are trying to access you from a mobile device and trying to get to your career site from mobile. Avoid pinch and pop. I hate when you have to do that and zoom in to read information on your mobile phone. So as you do your career site, make sure you avoid that. Look at the competition's mobile activity and track and measure trends. Like I said, see where candidates are looking for your jobs today. And like Will said, make it an easy apply solution. One-click apply and an easy way for them to store their resume on their mobile phone. And last but not least, we have the easy way, top 10 ways to get started when developing your employer brand. I loved working with Wiley & Sons on this book. All of them were so fabulous and wonderful to work with. Every one of their books kind of leaves you with a takeaway. In this case, we did the 10 easy ways to get started. Definitely check that out. I won't spend time on it since you'll get a copy after the webinar today. And I just wanted to point out, if you don't get the email for some reason, which all of you should, you can download the book directly from our website on the homepage at employers.glassdoor.com. And I think we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Matt, what you got for us?
Is Matt still on the line?
I think he muted himself this time.
Yeah. We had some muting problems at the beginning. You joined us late.
You can look at the Twitterverse here.
Yeah, see if there's any questions on that.
Okay, we are good with questions. Can you hear me?
There you are. I can hear you now.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. That was some awesome information and a lot of really good stuff there. The first question I guess I have is, who in the organization beyond recruiting is responsible for owning an employer brand, and what are some of the best ways to get them to buy in, knowing that oftentimes they just respond with, I have too much other work to do?
Yeah, man, boy, do I have some experience with that. You know, I think in most of the organizations that I've worked in, employer brand ownership has fallen on recruiting, which gives a few challenges, because the way recruiting is funded, it's very reactive, right? You have more funding when you have a lot of roles to fill, and then you don't when hiring slows down. But branding is a whole nother animal. Branding is something that needs to be consistent and constant, no matter whether you're hiring a lot or not. And so I found ways of really partnering with marketing, and I think most marketing departments, they're starting to kind of understand the value of telling more of a human story and the people side of the business. But most is just, they don't think about it that way. They're so involved in the product brand and the company brand that they're not thinking about this whole other side. And what I've done is I've kind of built a career of being really good at immediately coming in and building a really great rapport with marketing and saying, hi, yeah, I'm a recruiting guy, but I get what you do. And let me show you how we can partner together to not only help what I need to get done from a recruiting standpoint, but help you humanize our brand and really show the people side. You know, the people behind the products. Like, this is why reality TV is so popular. People want to know, what's going on behind the scenes. And I even find that people are looking at things like Glassdoor reviews to determine whether you even do business with a company, because they want to do business with a company that treats their employees right? So it can be a complex thing. I think it's really a partnership. I think most businesses nowadays don't even have to live in this world where recruiting owns this and marketing owns this. It should all be a a collective effort. It should be a dotted line. It should be collaborative. So I've been in places where I've successfully worked hand in hand with corporate communications and marketing, and had dual ownership, but most of the time I've owned it and I worked with marketing for brand consistency. Sometimes they help out with some funding and things like that. So if you can really prove your point with marketing and get them on board, it can create a really great partnership.
In terms of the different platforms for amplifying your employer brand, which ones do you recommend being the most successful for recruiting, and how do those fit in with a career site and my ATS?
Yeah. So I really think I've had a lot of success with places much like Twitter. LinkedIn is a great source still for a lot of sales and professional talent like that. On there, it's sort of a one-way conversation. In most social sites, it's you're not really getting to quite the transparentness. It depends on your content, right? But I really see as our social sites, so Twitter, as really where the conversations are happening. Candidates ask questions, I respond. It's more conversational. I see Facebook as more brand focused. This is the latest news that's going on. This is this awesome mention in the news. Here's a video of an employee story. And I see LinkedIn is really about jobs and who we see ourselves as an employer. But then Glassdoor, I've always used, even before I worked here, so this is completely unbiased, I've always used Glassdoor as really a central pillar in my employer branding strategy, where it's sort of that microsite where I bring all of it together. So on Glassdoor, you have the user-generated content, the reviews, salaries, things like that, but then you also are able to highlight and actually match. When you have the advanced employer account, you can actually match your design of the Glassdoor microsite and company profile to the design of your career site, so you're consistent. And you can also show like windows into your social network, so you can display like literally the wall, the recent posts on your Facebook page for careers. You can show your YouTube videos and your Twitter all in one place. And obviously the Glassdoor profiles have amazing SEO. Pretty much if you say working at company name, like Glassdoor comes up, and if they go there, at least that's one window that takes them either to the career site to apply, or takes them to your Twitter page to ask a question, or takes them to Facebook to interact with content. So I see these as all different parts of a multi-channel strategy, but I see Glassdoor as really that place that brings it all together and ties it all in, right? And so your career site should be really about your jobs and getting people to the jobs, but social really about the conversation, and kind of Glassdoor, LinkedIn profiles about your brand.
Yep.
And great. And you had talked earlier about engaging on Glassdoor and trying to drive the conversation around reviews. In what situations would you advise leaders or HR professionals not to respond or engage to in Glassdoor reviews, if anything?
Well, Matt, I think that's really a case-by-case basis, right? I highly recommend that you download the book, The 5 Do's and Don'ts, because that lays out, like, do this, don't do this. It's a great ebook to lean on. We've actually done webinars on it as well, so highly recommend that because we get into details of specific examples. But I'll let Will jump in too on
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't know if there's any that you just don't respond to, because if there's comments that are, that have cursing or that are just like obvious rants, those aren't going on Glassdoor. Those violate our terms of service, right? So the kind of reviews that are going to be out there have both positive and negative reviews. I think it's great when you respond to really both, responding to negative reviews, but in a way that shows that you fix that problem, or thank you for your feedback. Like, we've taken this and it's created positive change at our organization, and this way, that's the best way to do it. But also respond to the positive ones. When employees truly pour their heart out to really show like why they have such pride and love for your company, you should respond to, thank you so much for your feedback. We love hearing from employees in this way. So I think you respond to either one. But the ones that you wouldn't want to respond, or maybe PR would be like, don't talk. I mean, obviously that's up to how you work with PR and how you want to respond to that stuff. But I think all's fair game on Glassdoor. It's all about transparency.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. I think this is a good one. In an enterprise organization where there are various siloed functions in a lot of different markets, both domestically and globally, where there's not a unified corporate culture, how would you suggest building an employer brand? What is the approach when you have a bunch of different value propositions and corporate cultures working across business units and locations?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies that do this well. If you think about like companies like General Mills, they have tons of different brands and they have many sort of cultures and employer brands around those. But then they have the big overarching sort of General Mills careers accounts where they're just talking about General Mills in general, what's our culture. So you start on the macro level of trying to understand what your company is about and what your values are and what people that are naturally attracted to your organization are like in their stories. But then you get down to the micro level. So like at VMware, we started to realize that depending on what engineering team or what hiring team you were working on, it's a different kind of culture. So we actually did a program where we sent out $100 flip cams to all the offices, and we actually created videos, like 2-minute little videos with the hiring managers and the teams about their unique culture on their team and jobs open in their team. Where now pretty much every single hiring organization at VMware has a video where you can just get to know that little team, that little subset of the employer brand, of the culture. So like before when I was talking about telling all those little stories and together they come and create a unified theme, tell all the little stories because it is different working in the finance department than working in the engineering department. I mean, at SAP, which was a huge organization, we had like app houses where you could move around all the furniture and there's a cool, it was mainly a design and development office, totally different than if you went to like a sales focused office in Philadelphia, in Newtown Square, where it's customer focused and everybody wears suits and slacks. It's a totally different culture. So it's about telling all the different little stories about your company to make that ultimate culture, because yes, especially in large enterprise companies, there's different cultures, so you got to make sure they're equally represented.
Yeah, and one tool that I want to point out on Glassdoor too is you can actually go on the reviews tab. I point this out. I'm going to be publishing Employer Brand Analytics 101 to the site this week on employers.glassdoor.com. And I point out in that ebook that you can go on the reviews tab and actually filter by location to read the reviews from specific locations at your company. You can also filter by the job title. So really to get the message, like Will was saying, of different job titles and what they do, or different areas and what that message is and what employees are saying, that's a great tool to use to kind of get the vision and bring all those messages together.
Yep. Great. And with that, that concludes today's webinar. I'd like to thank our presenters, Alicia Garibaldi and Will Staney, as well as Glassdoor, for dropping some awesome knowledge. And a copy of the recording along with the deck will be sent to all attendees within 48 hours. So with that, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again on a future Recruiting Blogs webinar.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.